We're going to use just a couple of methods today for our design for our clay project. One is creating a sphere. A sphere is a round circle, but it's three-dimensional. And I took the clay and I set it in my hand and I moved my hands around to create that. Some people use the tabletop for that. Not so good. I always have to get it started this way. But every artist has their own method. So you could actually use the tabletop as well. Another thing that we're going to be using for our design are coils. Now, the coil that you're making needs to be larger than a pencil. But if you're at the size of like a thumb or a finger, then that's too thick. So somewhere in between a pencil and your finger. And what I'm doing is I'm taking this clay, rolling it in between my hands to create a coil. Another way that I could do this is take it in front of me on my tabletop, roll it back and forth until it creates a nice coil. Now with this coil, you can do a lot of things. You might just add this around a sphere. You might have it stand on its own. So maybe I'll make kind of a zigzag line or a curvy line and have it create a shape like that. You could use this two different ways. I'm going to make another one right now. Taking my coil in between my hands, rolling it back and forth to make a long coil. And again, trying to get the right thickness. If I go too thin, my clay project could definitely break. Now with this, I'm taking and starting it from the center, moving it around and around, and it becomes kind of a snail shape. These are some different ideas that you might use for your project. Different ideas that could be used would be just a straight coil, a curved coil, zigzag, a sphere, and there's a lot of other ideas that I'm sure you'll come up with as well. Our project is going to be radial balance, our clay project today. So there's a worksheet that you'll first get, and it has two circles at the top and then a large triangle. The reason I gave you a triangle is because this is going to be our final design. But up here we have two thumbnail sketches. Now I gave you some tick marks here. The tick marks are for you to divide this circle in a way that's going to create radial balance. So it could be like this. We could start our design like this, or you could go a step further and make two lines like this. And the reason that the lines are just guidelines for us, for our design. Here I have just the two tick marks, or you could bring it one step further. So when I'm making my design, I want to start from the center and work my way out. So here I have a circle. Now maybe I'll add those curved coils in the next layer. And whatever I add into one, I need to add the same thing in all four, or eight in this case, 8 spaces. Maybe I'll add those spheres again. Again, whatever I add into one, I need to add into all. Working my way out. While I'm doing, this is going to be the same as the other one, it's just going to be 4 spaces. So maybe this time I start with kind of that snail looking coil, and then I take my coils and I move it more into a angled shape, like a triangle. And then I could add a circle or a sphere on each of those spaces, right on the lines, and work my way out. You'll fill all the way out to the edge. Once you have decided on a plan, you're going to design it in here on this one pie shape. So I also gave little tick marks on here When I draw a cross, that's going to show kind of the division of what I would want the clay to look like. So if I'm going to add a sphere to begin with, I'll add just the part that I would see down here and maybe a coil. If it doesn't look like a coil, you can actually write that note on there. In the next layer, I might add those zigzags with my coil. In the next layer, I might add a sphere with a coil around it. Maybe a few of those, and so on. You'll work your way out until you have a full design. Now that we have our design and our clay, now we're going to start to create our project. So you were supposed to bring in a container. I brought in a plate. And what we need to do is make sure that we cover that plate or bowl, whatever you brought in, with some paper. So I'm going to use the back side of my plate. And there is no right answer on that. You can use the back side or the front side. If you feel more comfortable taping this down, using some tape and taping this down, you certainly may. But I'm happy with it just like this. I'm going to think about my plan, and I'm going to start by adding on from the center and working my way out. So I'm going to use that coil that I made earlier, and I also made some spheres. I'm going to use those as well. And in my plan, I had a coil or a spiral in the center, and then I'm adding my spheres on the outside, like so. Notice I'm adding like one on the top, one on the bottom, one on the side, one on the side, trying to make it nice and even. Now, my plan then also required a coil in between, so I made a coil. Now I'm connecting my spheres with the coil. And so on. Once you have 2 layers, that one's a little thin, I'm going to add some extra clay on that. Once you have 2 layers, now you're going to start blending it from the back side, and that's the side that we're looking at. So I have 2 layers. I have the main focal point, and then I'm working my way out. So, supporting from the sides, I'm going to start smearing my clay. Now here's where it gets a little dangerous, because we do need to make sure that this is at least 1/4 inch when we're finished with it. Now, sometimes when I say 1/4 inch, it is hard to understand what that means. So I use the analogy, a double stuffed Oreo needs to be the same width as a double stuffed Oreo cookie. If you go too thin, again, your project will break. It just falls apart. It gets too thin. And if I don't blend enough at this stage, it could break as well. So I'm blending this so I won't see anything at all anymore as far as my design goes. But the good news is the design actually remains on the other side. I'm going to show you this, but I would like you to finish your design before you take it off from your plate. You can see that the design is still there. It looks a little bit different. There's some cracks and whatnot, but that's kind of the charm of this project. And we can fix those later on. So then I'll look at my design again and try to decide what the next, what I was going to do next, and create my next layer. Once I have my next layer completely done, all the way around, then I'll go back and smear that second layer into my original space right here. So I'll go in and I'll smear it just like this. Okay? Continue that until you've finished your container. Once you're done with your project, you have it as big as you would like it. A way to challenge yourself a little bit is to add some feet on the bottom. So there's a couple of different ways to do that. One is to create your spheres again, and you want them all to be about the same size. And you'll make maybe, oh, you could make 3, you can make 4. It's up to you. Place them down. This is going to be the bottom of our project. And smear them in. Now what this is going to do is actually raise my dish up a little bit. And it'll be nice when we're glazing too, because we'll be able to just wax the bottom of our feet. These are called feet, rather than the bottom of our whole plate. So I'm smearing it in, but not only that, I'm kind of going back and really finishing this out, making it nice and neat. Okay, I could probably spend a little bit more time on these, but for the sake of time, I'm going to move aside to another way to create feet. This was a project that I did last hour. I'm completed with it, and so I added a foot a little bit different here. Instead of adding the spheres, I created a coil, went around the bottom, and I smeared all of that in. So now I have a foot that looks a little different. So when I place that down, it'll have a little lift to it when I'm completed. Now here's a good example of how some of these pieces are not absolutely perfect. So you can go back in here and smooth out some of those cracks, smooth out some of those places that just need a little extra help. Another tool that you can use, or well, another way that you can just kind of get a little picky here, is go back in, not carving into it too deep. I'm just kind of drawing those lines again, because in some areas my design was lost. So I'm using any kind of clay tool right now. It's just a butter knife, and I'm pressing those back in so that they stand out and it looks nice and neat. So when you're all done with everything, these are the things that you can do to just get a little fussy and really create this to be a wonderful piece of artwork. Adding the feet, smoothing out the front, and then adding those shapes back in that were lost when we were smearing.